This podcast is brought to you by Anchor Podcasts. Have you yourself ever wanted to be a podcaster? Well, Anchor makes it simple and easy for you to start today. Download their app on your iPhone or Android device and go through their step-by-step process from recording all the way through distribution. Visit their website, anchor.fm, or download the app on your Android or iPhone device today. That's Anchor Podcast. What's up, y'all? It's Travis Fowler, Harkrider here, back with another edition of the Four Corner Podcast. So let's talk wrestling. This week has been pretty fun when it came to professional wrestling. I mean, I don't want to say that there's been a lot of notable things that have gone on, but there's definitely been some progression, especially with storytelling on SmackDown last night. We saw the continuation of the Bloodline storyline and Sami Zayn's role in that, having a great promo segment with Paul Heyman on top of it. And then Jey Uso ended up showing up for the tag title match, which I don't think a lot of people doubted that was going to happen. But it was probably the interaction that came after the match that really solidified the interest going into next week. Now, obviously, they wrote in something to keep the Usos off of television due to their DUI issues that have stemmed from years ago. But they did also have the interaction between Jey and Sami, where Sami acknowledged Jey, which who's to say what that really actually means, but it definitely leaves intrigue for the story going into next week, also going into the Elimination Chamber and into WrestleMania. I still have the feeling, though, that this is going to lead to the tag team title match that I said on last week's episode between Sami and Kevin Owens against the Usos for the undisputed tag titles. That's been the route that it seemingly has been going for months. I don't think they're going to stray away from that course at this point. But speaking of Sami Zayn and his surge in popularity over this whole Bloodline angle, it really actually reminds me of another time that he had a similar success, which was back in the old NXT days, like the original before it was on the network, before Peacock, before USA, when you could only watch NXT on Hulu because it was broadcast overseas on a network. But here in the States, that was the only way you could watch it. And that also was back when they were starting to use it as the developmental, and it wasn't really the third brand that we would come to know and love later on, but it definitely was an entertaining show. I can remember I used to be a guy who would always tell my friends, hey, you need to watch NXT because this is quickly becoming the best show that WWE has, and that was including Raw or SmackDown. And honestly, I thought what they turned it into is what it should have been all along, is a new brand for new and upcoming stars to start establishing themselves as characters, get their in-ring work down, and eventually graduate to the Raw or SmackDown brands, which is what I think it should have been all along instead of that stupid game show narrative that we got for a couple of years. But this is very reminiscent of the Sami NXT run, because in 2014, Sami had gone on a little bit of a losing streak, but being the, as they called him, underdog from the underground, everybody got behind him. Everybody was just waiting for him and his big moment because he had built up such a rapport with fans due to his in-ring work, specifically in his series of matches against Cesaro. Those two have unbelievable chemistry, and they told unbelievable stories with their matches, especially the 2 out of 3 falls match that got them really noticed and got a lot of people in the wrestling world talking. And as 2014 went along, he continually gained momentum all the way till the end of the year at the NXT R Evolution, what at the time was known as one of their special events, or what we now know as premium live events. That night, if Sami Zayn didn't walk out NXT champion, I think there could have been a riot. Legitimately could have been a riot. It was one of the better NXT Premium Live Event shows, and it really capped off with the Sami Zayn NXT title win. And I think some people are kind of reminiscent of that, which is why they want Sami Zayn to get not only this title opportunity, but be the one to dethrone Roman Reigns as well. Um, I like Roman. I like Sami. I like the story. But overall, I really do believe that he's just not the guy. This is Cody's spot. This is Cody's time. And Sami is a great worker. And I don't think he's not going to go without a WWE title run in the future. Just not right now. Speaking of NXT, though, I think we are on the verge of another NXT resurgence because this new version of NXT that we've seen over the last, I don't know, I'd say few months, 7 months since the regime change, you've had remnants of the old black and gold in this new white and gold, if we want to go that route. Um, but they also went back to basics. As I mentioned earlier, during the original NXT days, it was a developmental area. It was meant to develop characters and find what works for people. And I think they wanted to get back to that, which is what 2.0 was supposed to do. And I think they leaned a little bit too heavy on the character side of the 2.0 change, but they've slowly started realizing, well, we've got great athletes who can still put on great matches, but we can still also focus on character development as well. And you see it in guys like JD McDonough, you see it in Carmelo Hayes, especially Braun Breaker, Grayson Waller, who is going to be a huge deal when he gets on the main roster. The guy has become a heat magnet. And I do believe that with those aforementioned names and several others that are on the rise, especially in the women's division with women like Zoe Stark, Sol Ruka, especially Tiffany Stratton, and several of the NXT UK alums, such as Alba Fire and Isla Dawn. There are so many women that will bring prominence to the women's division. Roxanne Perez, the current NXT champion, Cora Jade, the list goes on and on. I'm just having names come off to the top of my head. I really think we're going to see NXT rise back to a level of prominence, especially after I saw that Vengeance Day premium live event. So many good things came out of that, and I do think we have another resurgence for NXT coming forth here. And the next few months, I think we're going to be talking about NXT like we did back in the old days. But I want to transition away from NXT and WWE and talk about AEW, because talking about homegrown talents, AEW was very homegrown centered on this past week's episode of Dynamite. You had the Ricky Starks angle with the Jericho Appreciation Society. They've really been pushing Ricky Starks, which he's very deserving of, and I think he's been performing extremely well. Of course, the Bryan Danielson MJF storyline continued, and I believe, I'm sorry if I mispronounce his name, but it's Takesha, I believe, had a great match with Danielson, and then that continued their feud with the MJF assault. And you had the main event with the Guns versus the most over act that AEW has currently in the Acclaimed. That tag team group right there is over as freaking Rover can be. People love them. They were in the main event spot of all things. I did not expect that. I thought we were going to see the World Trios tag title match take the main event spot with AR Fox and Top Flight against the Elite, which is another example of pushing your homegrown stars, especially with Top Flight and AR Fox. So AEW is doing the right thing in a lot of ways of putting more notice on their own talent as opposed to just using the quote unquote WWE cast-offs. But speaking of that, I really think they need to be very careful on this Saraya Tony Storm heel turn storyline, because especially with the spray paint gimmick that they've been doing, I don't know if it's just me, but does anybody else get like nWo vibes out of this angle? You've got two people who came from the E over to All Elite Wrestling, and they're going after the homegrown talent, specifically right now, Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter. And they're trying to convince Ruby Soho that maybe you're actually one of us. Ruby's trying to play the Switzerland role right now. And I don't know. It just seems very reminiscent of that nWo style from the late 90s. And I think they just need to tread very carefully on how they continue this storyline. You need to try to make it something of your own. And with the spray paint gimmick, the utilization of, hey, well, we have been to the top before. We're the big stars here coming from Saraya and Tony Storm. I like both women, but I really think they just need to think about what their next move is and try not to be just a knockoff of an angle that's nearly 30 years old. Granted, it's worked in the past, but I don't know if maybe going for a copy is the right way to go. I know the nWo was a copy of a New Japan angle in and of itself, but maybe try to lean more towards something original as opposed to something that's really dated at this point. Another point to bring up with AEW that I saw this week, there is a possibility that we could see a return of CM Punk, if you can believe that. I saw it mentioned a couple times this past week that Punk's injury, which I believe it was either a torn tricep or a bicep, but it was about an 8-month recovery time. And that's coming up rather quickly. So there's been talks of if AEW is going to utilize Punk once he actually heals from his injury. And I don't think it's a bad idea to bring him back to TV because I do believe that you could make real money off of a CM Punk versus Elite storyline. And you have a great way to bring FTR back to TV from a hiatus because, as Dax Harwood has noted on his own podcast, he's friendly with Punk. And they, of course, did their little run for a team this past summer. Why not reunite that? Because there's obviously been legit animosity between FTR and the Bucks at one point in time. And I can really see money on a feud between the Elite and CM Punk and FTR. So that, along with so many other matches that we've been robbed of so far, I, I honestly, while I don't agree with how CM Punk handled things with the brawl out situation, um, I actually wouldn't mind seeing him back on TV. I think he is good for that brand specifically. And I want to see this play out through a storyline because it could be amazing storytelling from all 6 individuals. So only time will tell how this ends up going, but hopefully it sways in the way of us having great television. But something I wanted to bring up about great television as well that relates back to the nWo angle was earlier this week, Eric Bischoff on his own podcast admitted that the Bloodline story is a way better story than the nWo. And he talked about this on the recent 83 Weeks episode covering the nWo Wolfpack, which, by the way, I really think people hate the nWo Wolfpack way too much. At least that's the narrative that WWE tried to play up for a little bit. Because speaking as somebody who was a huge fan during that time, I dug the nWo Wolfpack, the Red and Black Attack, and I know a lot of people that did. I can even remember specifically there was a choir concert at my elementary school where we had to have a partner, and me and my buddy chose each other, and the only thing we had matching was our nWo red and black t-shirts. So during the actual performance, that's what we wore. That is what we wore was our nWo Wolfpack shirts. And I really don't get why people think it wasn't popular, because for people like me who loved the nWo story but hated the black and white, red and black, we could cheer for. And my favorite of all time is Sting. So when Sting joined the Wolfpack especially, is game over. I was Wolfpack 2 sweet in the house all day long. So I digress, get back to the point. Eric Bischoff stating that the Bloodline story was better than the nWo storyline, it's hard to argue that now. And he agrees because of the way the logic of that story has been told through progression. It has led to moment after moment after moment, all logically. All of it has built characters over time. Look at Jey Uso, who turned into a main event player and has a focal point on him right now. Sami Zayn has been the dark horse that's come out of this as a huge star. Roman Reigns was solidified as an awesome, badass heel that when he does turn face, it's going to be the biggest change and star in the industry from that point. Everybody's going to love Roman when he goes back to being a babyface. It's written on the wall. It was how it should have been done originally. And overall, I don't know a single person who likes wrestling that isn't intrigued and pulled back in hardcore by this Bloodline story. It's been the best thing going over the last 3 years, especially during those pandemic times, for them to go through that all the way up to where we're at now and what looks to be the beginnings of the implosion and downfall of the Bloodline. All of it's been told masterfully. And I really can't wait to see how this unfolds after WrestleMania, at WrestleMania, probably all the way to SummerSlam, when I do believe we'll see potentially Jey Uso get his revenge against his cousin Roman Reigns. Couple other things to talk about. Some big news that took place actually just today, earlier today here stateside, that was going on over the evening time, I should say, in Japan. Jay White lost a loser leaves Japan matchup to Hikuleo. And a lot of people were surprised by it because people thought that, at this point, Jay White had several years or at least months on his contract left. There was a rumor going about that his contract was coming up pretty soon, which is one that I saw. And now you've got questions of, well, if this is legit, where is he going to go from here? Is he going to go to AEW where people think he would fit in best? Or with the new regime in charge, creatively at least, could he be a good fit for the WWE? Jay White's proven to be a commodity. He's a great promo, a heck of a wrestler. This guy has all the tools that it takes to be a top star here stateside. And now he just kind of has his pick of where he wants to go and what side is willing to offer him the best deal. So it's going to be really interesting to see what goes on in the career of Jay White over the next couple of months. Now, a couple more things to talk about. The sale of WWE, which Nick Khan went on record recently, he believes that that could be completed within the next 3 months, unbelievably. The amount of money that a number of people are set to make from the sale of this company is unbelievable. Dave Meltzer had talked about this on the Wrestling Observer Network earlier this week. Let's kind of break things down a little bit. Based off of a sale price of $8 billion, this is what these select people would bank from the sale. Vince McMahon, $2.5 billion. Stephanie McMahon, $170.8 million. Linda McMahon, $50.3 million. Kevin Dunn, $24.2 million. Nick Khan, $13.8 million. Frank Riddick, $10.9 million. And Paul Triple H Levesque, $8.3 million. That's a huge payday for a lot of people. And it's got a lot of us intrigued as to exactly who's going to end up offering up that highest bid. And again, that's just based off of a sale of $8 billion. Can you imagine if they get more than that out of this sale? It's really interesting to see how this has gone on and what's going to happen over the next 3 months, since that's what Nick Khan believes the company can be sold within that time frame. I think a lot of us are going to be intrigued as to how much the company sells for and who acquires the company. I know they had a report that Comcast, NBCU had backed out of the deal. I still don't necessarily see that as a fact. I think they would still be one of the front runners, really, since they've got the network on Peacock now. To me, it just makes sense. But you also have Disney to think about as well, and several others that have been rumored to buy the WWE, including Saudi Arabia. even though we know how that went down when the rumor came out that Saudi Arabia had purchased them about a month or so ago. So only time will tell, but it's still a very intriguing story, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes from here. Last thing that I want to talk about, and this is going to kind of get a little deep for everybody, so bear with me. Two AEW / Ring of Honor stars had some comments regarding a couple of stars in professional wrestling. Jay Lethal spoke about Jay Briscoe and them being kept off TV, them being the Briscoes this past week. Specifically, Jay, due to some comments that he had tweeted out several years ago regarding the legalization of gay marriage nationwide. He made some statements that people weren't exactly thrilled with. And once he was brought to light about the severity of his situation and the magnitude of how it affected people, he did actually apologize for his tweet, even though at the time he felt he was right. He later would notice his wrongdoing and try to make amends for that. But because of that one tweet so many years ago, that's what kept him and his brother from appearing on AEW television once Ring of Honor was bought out. And it's a real shame because they were one of the best tag teams in professional wrestling, not just Ring of Honor, but in professional wrestling as a whole. They were one of my favorite tag teams of this generation. And it's a damn shame that some tweet that has now since been changed on a thought process kept him and his brother from experiencing true glory and international stardom, at least here stateside. I know they wrestled over in Japan and were stars there. You have the hardcore audience that knew who the Briscoes were here, but they never got the chance to really show what they could do on the national platform of like an AEW or a WWE. And it's sad that it took a car accident for Mark Briscoe to get his opportunity after his brother had passed on due to the car accident. And Jay Lethal agreed, saying that it's messed up essentially that a man tried to atone for his actions and make good on repairing what he had done and basically was never given a shot. On another story, MJF came to the defense of one Nash Carter, who also is known as Zachary Wentz on the independent scene, Nash Carter being his WWE NXT name. And as most of you know, last year he was let go from WWE after a picture from his ex, Kimberly, came out where he had a Hitler-like mustache. And something that MJF wanted to make apparent was Zachary Wentz is very far from a anti-Semitic person. And he went on to explain a story of when a fellow colleague at a show actually keyed his car, MJF's car. And the first person that came to his defense was indeed Zachary Wentz. And MJF would go on to say that a man who never breaks character flat out said that it's a shame that he was kept off of TV due to a personal issue and somebody posting a picture that he did in jest. And I think that actually goes to speak towards all of cancel culture, that things that we've done in our past should not always be held against us, especially if we've made the attempts to correct those errors or maybe have had a change of thought. But because something was done years ago and people want to latch onto it, they want to try to destroy a career or life or whatever they can just because there was an error in judgment at one point in time. Now, I understand there are certain things that shouldn't be swept under the rug. There are things that need to be corrected, but that doesn't mean people shouldn't be given a second chance. So my request to everybody out there, not just in this situation, but just as a whole with this whole cancel culture these days, is depending on the situation, clearly, if somebody is trying to atone for their actions and make good on correcting their mistake, give them the second chance. because none of us are perfect. We've all made mistakes that I'm sure we wish we could go back and do over, if you will. And holding somebody to a certain standard that maybe was either questionable or isn't who they are now shouldn't be something that's held against them for the rest of their life. So I implore all of you that if you have anything in your past that you have tried to make good on and people around you are maybe a little leery to those people, I say give that person another chance and see if they can prove to you that they indeed aren't the person you thought they were. And who knows, you may be surprised by what you find out from that person. Well, guys, I know that was a little deep there, and that probably was one of the more, I would say, emotional or deep thoughts, if you will, to end the podcast. But that's how I'm going to conclude this, is just a little food for thought. I also want to give a quick shout out to everybody who's been watching our shorts and our reels this past week on both Facebook and YouTube, as well as to our new subscribers on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. All of you that have been liking the posts and just supporting us with your comments and shares and everything is very appreciated. I enjoy doing this, and I'm glad that I can actually put my opinions out there that other people either agree with or enjoy. And even if you don't, I love having the dialogue to talk about what you would like to see happen in wrestling, or just in general, what you'd see in a storyline, or what your opinion is on a topic overall. So thank you guys so much. And I will just leave you with this. If you haven't already, please go subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps out the channel. Make sure that you follow us on Twitter and Instagram, like our Facebook page. Make sure you go subscribe to the podcast on your Apple Podcast or Spotify or Anchor Podcasts. Give us a shot and make sure you subscribe, because it really does help out our channel. So until next week, Elimination Chamber weekend, I will see you guys then for predictions and maybe a follow-up of how things went down at Chamber. But until that time, enjoy the week ahead and continue to love pro wrestling. Later.